Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast. And now your host, Micah Chrisman.
Hello, welcome to the Pray for Micah podcast, where we explore art, community, spirituality, and our cosmic significance / insignificance.
Our Father, who art Micah. What up?
Hallowed be thy significance, or lack thereof.
Everything's very significant.
My friend here who operates in both that duality of significance and non-significance, insignificance, I should say. His name is Scott Asbell. He's a good buddy of mine. We work together, and I have the pleasure of having him on the show. And I'm gonna read a little bio, a little doodad about him.
Alrighty, let's hear it.
Ever playful and ever the student of the Paschal mystery, Scott Asbell dances through dizzying and even often concurrent life, death and resurrection, journeys to joyfully and artfully weave his life well lived. Growing up in the spiritual worlds of young life and the Presbyterian Church. Shout out to all my Presbyterian people. I just interviewed a Presbyterian pastor last week.
PCA, pipe, cigars, and alcohol.
Scott now feels most at home in the perennial tradition. We'll get more into that later, including and especially mystical contemplative Christianity. He's a student of the Enneagram and Integral Theory. Integral Theory. Also, I'm going to have you give us definitions for that, and credits those energies for initiating and ushering him into the second half of his spiritual life. While business management and entrepreneurship has been a cornerstone of Scott's life from an early age, he even bought and ran a bowling alley at 21 years old. And he considers his life's pursuit and work, his creative pursuits and endeavors to be his life's purpose and work. A self-taught musician, songwriter, Scott writes and releases music under the name of Cardinal Folk, Absolute All, and Wander Yonder.
Wander Yonder.
His alter egos of those bands. His other most creative endeavor is building tiny houses and creating DIY carpentry videos via YouTube under the moniker Slacker Scott.
Slacker Scott, not lazy.
Scott,
not cheap.
Scott Asbell, Scott Dad Asbell, though.
Dad Asbell.
Dad Asbell. I told him, I was like, I have a surprise. I thought about it on the way here. I was like, he calls me Kissy Chrissy.
Chrissy.
Micah Chrisman. So I got the nickname Chrissy from him. And I'm like, I'm going to start calling him Dad Asbell, though.
Dad Asbell. Love it.
Thanks for being here, bud.
Thank you.
And
letting me sit in your yellow chair.
Yeah, I want y'all, if you're on the YouTube side, you can take note. We're so close. In fact, he's wearing my sweater.
I've absorbed it.
He's absorbed it.
I stole it.
It just kind of looks better on him. He was just like, he was like, Micah, I just need something comfy tonight. And him and his wife came over to hang out. And it was a little chilly outside. I was like, here, this is a new sweater thing I got. But I don't feel like I was wearing it as often because I actually got that artist who designed it. I got that tattoo on my arm. So I was like, well, it's so permanent now. The same design on your shirt is on my arm.
Yeah.
It's called Awake Happy is the company. Anyways, the title for that artwork was The Illusion of Separateness.
The Illusion of Separateness.
So I like to think that that's my shirt and it's separate. But it's actually
still yours.
I'm saying it's the dual. It's the illusion of separateness. It's actually we are that shirt. We are shirt.
I am shirt.
I am shirt. We are that shirt.
It can be yours forever. I'm just gonna wear it.
Well, that's fine. Just know that I give it to you in the good blessing that I don't expect it back. And it looks good on him. So y'all can give him a shout out in the comments. For whoever wants to do that, Also, just wanted to brag about the cool tattoo, that same design.
It's a cool tattoo.
So, Scott, we don't know who you are. I do, but folks don't. And we got a little taste, a little simmer about kind of your life journey and where you've been. But those were the broad strokes in your bio. So start us from the beginning. Walk us from the womb to this room. No, I'm just kidding.
I've been running. Can't walk it there.
But yeah, I guess I know you're from Virginia. And you've kind of journeyed from there to California, back to Asheville. And we kind of moved here. You kind of moved back to this region recently.
Mm-hmm.
My first time living out here ever outside of Kansas City. And yeah, so kind of just share with us a little bit, like you can kind of share from your like spiritual upbringing maybe a little bit from your life in Virginia and what that was like.
Cool. Yeah, I grew up in the southeast part of the Virginia, 757 Hampton Roads, Tidewater, a bunch of names for it. I grew up in Suffolk, probably the most rural of the 7 cities down in that corner of the state. And yeah, kind of like suburban, like neighborhood, like not super like suburbia, but a little bit. But there was like space to ride my skateboards and bikes around the neighborhood and have friends go chill at their houses and stuff. So it was cool. But yeah, grew up down there, family of 4, mom, dad, me, and then I have a younger sibling who's 2 years younger. And so, you know, classic first kid stuff going on, just like being the first one to do all the things, the experimenter, like very much go-getter, very independent, et cetera, et cetera. And grew up in a very religious household. And yeah, kind of from the age I was 5, we got plugged in with this Presbyterian Church in Suffolk that we really liked, Westminster Reformed Presbyterian Church. And yeah, it was great. Growing up, we had a really cool pastor. He kind of had like a hippie soul from like growing up, but also was, you know, in the Reformed Presbyterian world, and a little bit of an older, you know, pastor. Mm-hmm. Not like super old, but like, I don't know. He's like a cool soul. And I feel like I learned a bunch of interesting dynamics and thoughts from him that were different. But yeah, grew up in the Presbyterian Church. My folks were also, they started getting involved in Young Life. They were like on Young Life Committee, which is like the volunteer parents in the area that help like make sure it happens. And so when I started being middle school age, I started going to Wildlife, which is like a Young Life for middle schoolers. Went to Young Life in high school, led Young Life in college. Young Life was just like fun. Like in college, like it was like there were 3 big Christian organizations, like Young Life, InterVarsity, and then Campus Crusade. Mm-hmm. And InterVarsity, I think we had the biggest chapter in the whole country at our school. Like it was a big school, like 26,000, and like really big, like Christian organization, whatever. And Young Life kids were definitely like the coolest of the Christian kids. Yeah. And then it was Ivy, and then it was Crew kids. Sorry, Josh Tweary.
Lame Crew kids.
Crew friends. Yeah. But yeah, I was involved in those worlds growing up. And yeah, I didn't really, I don't know, until like talking to people later in life, I didn't really realize that a lot of people grew up with a whole different God and Jesus than me. Like I definitely had nice Jesus who like would die for you if you're the only person left on earth. Right. And, you know, even like my pastor was very much like second creation, like return back to earth kind of person. And so he's like, the earth is important and taking care of it now is important because we're coming back, like after we get, you know, not reincarnated, but like resurrected. Mm-hmm. Like heaven is going to be more temporary and like the new heaven and the new earth. And so like, you know, that was like cool to grow up with like that kind of framework where like this world is important, like what you're doing now matters. And Presbyterians are super study-ish, you know, like that. I don't know if you've heard that joke of like how to Baptists say like amen, and like when Presbyterian pastor makes a good point, like Presbyterians just take notes. Like that's how you know the sermon's fires, because they're taking notes.
It's Fire Chef.
Yeah, it's Fire Chef. And so, you know, very studious, very devotional. It's interesting, like, you know, looking at that through a lens of like the spiritual world afterward. And I think what you would call that would be spiritual practice. Like, you know, sitting down every day, looking at passages of scripture, reflecting on like how it applies to you, what's going on inside your, you know, heart, psyche, self, you know, whatever. heart, mind, body structure, and then like, figuring out like how to grow and devotion and love for other people. And so that was kind of like the world I grew up in. And like Young Life I think is a pretty cool organization in terms of like structure, because the whole thing is about like, I don't know if you are super familiar, but the whole thing is about like earning the right to be heard. And so it's definitely an outreach, but the premise is like no one, like you don't necessarily have the right to be heard by someone unless you have a relationship. And like the whole idea is like, Christ and whatever is like very relational. And so, like relationship is the most important thing. And so it was all about establishing relationships and then like from that sharing. And so it was very relationship forward first and sharing second, which I liked because I never liked sharing the gospel, but I liked relationships and building them. Like the only dude I ever prayed with to accept Christ, his name is Christian, which is funny. And he is my bandmate and my duo Absolute All, which is really funny because like, he's the only person I ever prayed to celebrate, accept Christ. And like, we'll get drunk and have done, like shrooms together and like, have this like power duo.
So you guys got saved
existential,
and you went through all that together.
Band, and we like sing all these like existential, emo, spiritual kind of songs with just a whole different world. And but we're still good buds. He was in high school when I met him because like that's like I don't know if that's like the formula for Young Life is like volunteers go into schools, like make friends with.
We go into schools and we make friends with young people.
Yes, and then we share.
And then we share
Jesus.
And we open their hearts to the Lord
through a lot of fun games and acoustic covers of pop songs on the radio.
I have a funny story of I don't remember who this person was. I don't even remember this happening, but I just remember years later this mother. She came to me, I don't know, maybe it was at my grandma's funeral or something, and she like pulled me aside. She's like, Micah, I don't know if you remember me, but my son, I can't even remember her son's name at this point. It's been so many years, but I mean, she said that when I was like a little kid, like probably like 7 or 8 years old, I like cornered her son in a bathroom and like, asked him if he died today, where he would go, heaven or hell. And he said, I don't know. I've never, and, apparently I wouldn't let him leave the bathroom until we prayed the prayer and got saved. And she was like, that's like his, I came to know Jesus.
Yeah.
This random guy, Micah, cornered me about, I can't remember his name, but that was how like, I was like, oh shit, I'm here at the sink with a dude. And he's, all right, we'll wash our hands, but we don't even have time. We have to.
Yeah.
You can't leave this bathroom. What if you slip and fall and die? We have to get you going to heaven.
Funny. I never had that urgency, and I don't know if it's just like a intuitive understanding of like that's not the game, or if it was a bit of embarrassment.
Yeah.
But whatever the case was, like that's how it was for me, and I don't know. It feels good.
But I like the relationship aspect. I mean, we came from that angle too, as far as like, it wasn't necessarily like all fire and brimstone kind of deal, but there were phases and periods where it's like, I don't know, I don't find it a coincidence that I went into marketing because I just learned really like how to create my elevator pitch. And could like go to a park and we'd have like these days where like our group is going to go witness to people at a random park. You're just
sounds terrible.
You're just trying to enjoy your day, and like, man, I can sit down with you, coax you into the conversation. Next thing you know, I'm trying to get you to pray a prayer within 5 or 10 minutes. It's like
never done it. Never. That sounds awful.
It was speed the lead or whatever.
Speed to lead.
Speed to lead. Yes.
Yeah.
We have to. All right, you're not into it. Okay, let me go to the next person. Let me get you into it.
Yeah. The other interesting thing growing up that I hadn't really thought about in a while. My family did family devotions for the longest time. Like, it's kind of like every night, like we made it a big deal to sit down and eat together every night. And then a lot of times afterwards, like around the table, or we just move to the living room, we do family devotions. And like typically what it was like reading like a paragraph or like, they have like the labels of the scripture, like what each story is. Like we'd read one of those or like one proverb a day or whatever. And then we do like a family prayer request and all pray together for each other, like,
That's
highs
nice.
and lows. And my mom was always the initiator of that and kind of like the spiritual force of like moving forward in the house. And I don't know, that's just interesting to think about now, just even like that as like, practice around community. And I don't know, it's just really interesting. And I'm really thankful for that. And like, I'm really close with my folks, and family. And so I don't know how much that contributed to it, but I imagine a bit, because, everyone's sharing like something that's going hard and something that's great and what they think of that passage and learning. And just a really interesting.
Were you ever like introduced to music through church first? Like, did you learn guitar like that?
I didn't learn guitar until I graduated college.
Okay.
I grew up in a sports family, and it was kind of like a joke, like Asbells can't sing. And I love singing ever since I was a kid. Like, I always wanted to be like an emo singer, and like be like in a screamo band and like have the long black hair and whatever. And
you had the long hair.
Yeah, but it wasn't thin. Like all the emo kids had like their really thin, like swoopy hair. Mine's really thick. But all that to say, I liked singing. I've always liked singing. I've always like kind of like writing songs or rhymes, etc.
Hi, Rayla.
And I tried out for like the church musical at like age 7 or something. I did not get a spot, and I kind of gave up on that dream. And we're just a very like sportsy family. So, I just did sports.
You crushed your spirit at the school musical.
But I did like listen to music. I could only listen to Christian music until middle school. And in 6th grade, I started listening to secular music and would like wake up really early to like watch hours of MTV and Fuse and VH1, like music videos in the morning.
That's cool. Who was your, like, can you think back to like your first secular band or like your first non-Christian?
The first like bridge band was Switchfoot, because like Meant to Live was really big on the radio. That was my first like, I mean, it's still kind of Christian, but non-Christian show. Like my dad took me, we went and stood at a bar. I mean, we went and stood at a club, at a venue. I stood in beer. I'd never had smelt beer before or been around it. It was cool. The first non-Christian bands, the first music video I remember seeing is Yellow Card's Ocean Avenue, which is a super cool video. And then Def Cab for Cutie was probably another early one. Paramore.
Oh, I remember getting into Paramore.
Yeah, kind of like there was an alternative music MTV essentially called Fuse, and it played like no pop or hip hop. It was just all rock and all music and emo stuff, and so I watched that a lot. But yeah, those were some of the beginning ones, like Switchfoot. And Switchfoot was like a crossover, but then, Def Cab for Cutie, I think was another big one. So Postal Service. I'm trying to think about it.
I just remember my family being like on the fence of like the hard rock Christian bands, because I was like, I wanted to listen to Skillet and like POD and some of like, and people at the Christian bookstore were able to like verify, no, it's okay, they are Christian. It's like the days where you go to the Christian bookstore and you could like play a CD in a CD player and listen to it. And I remember my mom being like, this sounds like heavy metal, and it's like Skillet. And it's like, and I'm like, Mom, no, there's actual heavy metal that doesn't sound anything like this.
Yeah. It's really interesting that a lot of the screamo bands, like early screamo popular bands, were all Christians. Like
that's
like
a huge
Under
thing.
Oath, Devil Wears Prada, I think Norma Jean. Like it's really interesting.
Yeah, I got real big into those bands. All right, so you're kind of have your really cool family. As Austin says, you're like really nice child upbringing, no traumas, no. You're easy. No, you're easygoing childhood. She always gives you shit. She's like, I came from harder times apparently, or ever. Scott's like, I have nothing to complain about. I've actually had a great life so far, and I'm like, I love that.
Yeah.
So like, what made you like, I don't know, start to like expand your worldview? Because I know you still consider yourself like a mystical, contemplative Christian today, but in like the expanded view of that definition, we can explore that. But what made you even just kind of start to branch out, or what was there books that you read that like, oh shit, like let me think about this a little.
Yeah. And I think it's like I would consider myself a Christian in the sense of like, I think like Christianity at its roots is like about like a ternary sense of the universe, as opposed to a binary, like it's a 3 and it's moving forward. And yeah, like kind of like the mystical lens of that, and like the logos, like in the beginning was the word, the logos, like the pattern. I think there's like a pattern built into everything that's like complexity, and that like enjoys more complexity and moves towards that, and like suddenly emerges, etc. So I don't like I like yeah I would, I think I would say like I'm a Christian, but then most Christians say no, you're not, which is fine.
Right.
By me, it doesn't like matter. But I also, I'm totally into all the other perennial tradition stuff and other religious paths like, Buddhism and Hinduism. And
so what does perennial mean? Like traditions?
yeah, so like, perennial flowers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term.
Yeah.
But they come back year after year, like they're kind of steady. And it's like, so the perennial tradition, same root word. It's the stuff that is true kind of across all religions, and like all traditions. And so like when you get to like the mystical levels of most traditions, they kind of agree. And they're kind of like not talking about too much different things.
Like we kind of just come full circle kind of thing. Like that kind of is
it's just kind of like the truths that stretch across borders and boundaries. And like, like how did the Indian, Hindu faith have a triune Godhead? And then also the Christian faith on the other side of the world that probably was not very influenced by each other. Like how do they both come to triune Godheads? Like as a thing.
Right.
Just like different, not even like that as a thing, but then you like
sure.
move into some of the more mystical things about like not knowing being a main path towards knowing. And I don't know, it's just like listening to like, if I remember the first time I listened to Ram Dass's podcast, and he comes from a very yogic standpoint and a lot of Buddhist influence and stuff. He was talking about essentially like what like it's essentially predestination, free will kind of thing, but like through that lens of, just through that like lens of like Hinduism. I forget the words that he was using, but yeah, just like that whole argument of like, is it fated? Does it unravel? Or like, how much can we change it, etc. And like I guess as you continue to move up, there's like just certain things that are true, and I don't know. And that's kind of like the perennial tradition, and like why, a lot of people who are, I guess, identify probably as spiritual are like, yeah, I can fuck with all that stuff.
I also consider myself spiritual, but I still just think it's so funny, like the whole Family Guy bit. I can't remember if I've shared that already, or obviously people can go watch the show, but they're just, he's talking to God, and he's like, to the Buddhists, to the gays, whatever, do they all get? And he's like, God's like, yeah, of course, they all go straight up there. And he's like, what about the people who say they're just spiritual? He's like, straight to the bottom, right to the right to the core, the very bottom of hell. So I like to think that like being a spiritual person, like God's just like, yeah, fuck you, you're going straight down there.
Yeah.
But what do you feel like is still, as far as like what elements of the Christian tradition, like what parts still you feel like ring truth for you? And
sure. I think it's like I really like the metaphor of like learning to write poetry in a second language. Like my first language is English, and then if you want to relate that to the spiritual path, like it's Christianity, that's what I grew up in. I know a lot about it, and was shaped through the liturgy, through like the Bible, like just through everything. And so a lot of people, when they deconstruct from Christianity, like go find another path. And as much as I'd love to study like Hinduism or like comparative mythology, like whatever, like I can dig in as much as I want on that. And I'm like, I don't know, I was like 25, 30 before I started deconstructing, like in that age range. And it's going to take a long time to get to 25 years of Buddhism or Hinduism,
right.
And so like by the time I could start to like communicate and think even, and like, these complex ideas like
sure.
like poetry, if you don't know Spanish, you like for a long time, you can't write poetry in Spanish. And so I like that metaphor a lot. And like, that's a little bit of why it feels like at home, in the Christian world, because I can express some of these like spiritual truths that are maybe intangible or, harder to come across through like the myth, through the, story, through like just the structure of that, and it's also interesting to kind of go and like go backwards and like find these parallels that have always been there, and like how those are still true. And so so I don't know if that
Totally.
answers the question a little bit. But like that's why I feel like comfortable saying like, you know, I come at the world through like a Christian lens and like,
Yeah.
you know, specifically like from like a Trinity, like ternary thing. And, you know, I have a lot of different spiritual teachers, like I would consider like, you know, that have shaped my world. But yeah, definitely feel at home, like expressing that and those stories and metaphors that I've learned growing up. And, you know, I think literalism, like Richard Rohr says all the time, is the lowest level of truth. And, there's a lot more truth layers on top of literalism, and, they're really beautiful to dig into and, you know, see how that applies. And
yeah, and you said something that I think is just kind of an interesting fact to reflect on. Like, so on top of whatever faith construct you come from, there's already like a set language framework that you have to learn. Like, and I say language in like the loose sense of like, you know, just your terms and like what is the thing that you're studying or what you're a part of. But I was talking to another person on the podcast, Jason. We were talking about how just the baffling fact that like for years, you know, you had these missionaries who'd go and like try to like present the gospel to folks in Japan for the first time. And they have like, you know, but they had to like stay for a long time just to even like learn the, you know, Japanese language.
Yeah.
And they would start to try to express and share their faith. Finally, now that they had a frame, like an actual shared language experience, like be able to, and they realized like, oh no, your definition of this is actually not, it's skewed. Like, there was just literally
the same words don't even come
right.
up.
Like we're
like
not
we
even,
don't have an English word for the Tao back
exactly.
then.
And just like the how mind-boggling that would be. Like you're saying, we're just two white dudes coming from, you know, you kind of over here in the Appalachia area, for me from the Midwest, but we have similar experiences because we both have the easy shared language of English, but also a culture of upbringing that we have these frameworks for these different faith constructs. But just the idea of like the absurdity of trying, like, things can translate if you work really hard at it and try to like come across, but then just, I don't know, it just baffles my mind to even think that like, oh, someone could just never understand the concept of, you know, a tertiary triune Godhead of like, and like from this, it's like literally trying like, how do I actually know how Scott thinks and feels about a thing? I'll never know because I never could be in your body. And it's the same kind of thing when you think about extrapolating that from just individuals to like whole cultures. Like, oh, our culture could just never actually understand from a root fundamental level of how you see Buddhism, how you I could study it for 20 years and never really
never be from a collectivist society and have like a brain that works from a collectivist standpoint.
You're individualist or you could take capitalism and just all these other things, all the things, all my fried foods, you know. It's just, there's just things that my body and mind can't wrap its head around trying to relate. But I guess that's the beauty of the mystery of the world, that we somehow are all kind of probably connected. So would you say that there's like, I don't know, like a universal consciousness or a thing that kind of ebbs and flows that is but perhaps a triune or, you know, a Trinity experience, or just like how do you try to put your finger and touch that?
I don't know. It's been I kind of like use the terminology of like a cool or warm universe. Like after I kind of deconstructed from like the idea of like an anthropomorphized God, like when we make to be human-like, and like, you know, kind of like let go of that idea and like maybe thought of it more in terms of energy or more in terms of pattern. You know, I think like if you think about like a cooler universe, like that's a little bit probably more of what I would subscribe to, or like what I believe like intuitively or just like in my like spiritual heart or being. And like what I would call like a cooler universe would be like the idea like essentially like it's a giant domino unfolding, and like a domino tipped, and now it's just unfolding and unraveling because of how it interacts with each other, which would be like a very predestination kind of look at the world. And so like when I look at, you know, like that first passage of John, like, you know, in the beginning was the word, the logos, like the whatever. And logos just means blueprint. And like, you know, I think about cells, and I think about everything being in this ternary dance of, you know, a positive and negative and a reconciling third, like an active, passive, and then neutralizing force, and like creating new things. Like I see that as a blueprint. Like it's a blueprint I think is ingrained into everything in this earth. And like, it's all a ternary building block that's like, that enjoys complexity. I think we typically relate complexity to good. Like we use the word good when we mean complex, or rather they could be synonyms for each other. And, you know, so in that way, like it does seem like a very like logos, like blueprint thing. And I think that's a cooler world because there's not I think it's beautiful that that is built into it. Like we would call that like a good universe, right? Like like the world is good because built into ourselves is goodness, or this drive towards complexity, or, you know, whatever. And that's just a little bit cooler because there's not like a energy moving it and changing it, or like personal. And then like a warmer world, I think, would be, you know, like a God or an energy. Not, you probably wouldn't use like God, but like God, love, energy, being, force, sense, mystery, collective, unknown, whatever, that like cares and moves through the world and changes things. And that'd be like a little bit of a warmer universe. And I feel like the first like 6 years after deconstructing, I was like in a very cool universe, and like praying made zero sense to me. Like no amount of prayers made sense because I didn't think, you know, I just thought the cells were beautiful. Like the innate wiring of everything towards like, you know, this unfolding drama and play and Leela and complexity was awesome. And then, you know,
so if it didn't feel necessarily like loss happening, or you were saying it did after deconstruction, like did you feel like
I didn't feel like a loss because it didn't make sense to me conceptually anymore.
Sure.
And then I started to feel a little bit more warmth, and like there is something kind of guiding and a collective force. And I'm like still pretty like, that feels secondary to me. Like I'm, you know, definitely still more of like a cool universe person, but I think there's something there, like an unknown, and like part of me even just like starts to think about it, and it's like I think that's just the attraction between like the three polarities that are interplaying is like that thing that's guiding it, and I think it's beautiful. But but there's been times, you know, like, oh, like, you know, my prayer would just be help or thank you or whatever to whatever it is that's there. Or rather, like another way to say it, like to whatever we are, whatever I am. And that's kind of, you know, been beautiful. It's been beautiful to reintegrate both of those.
Do you verbalize those kind of things, or is it just more like a thought that passed through you, or?
It's typically a thought. Every now and then it'll be like.
I like the picture you driving in the car on the way to work, just being like,
thank you.
Whatever that we are. Yeah. Please hear me.
No, there's never any address. It's just the one word like thanks or help. Just, you know, very basic.
Sure.
Just
more like centering prayer kind of thing. Yeah. Huh. That's cool. Yeah, I told you, like, I've been trying to make my practice of like just being like present for 10 minutes every morning and trying to like picture like a thread running through my head, through my spine, through the entire center of the earth, and trying to feel the axis of the earth spinning through space. And it's very euphoric and dizzying some moments. Like I'm not necessarily like, there are moments I'm like, well, I'm on a spinning rock. And when you stop to hyper focus on that for 10 minutes, it's like, oh shit. Like it kind of can conceptually be a little overwhelming, but yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily centering prayer, but that's been my way of prayer, of trying to like breathe and focus on my place in the universe and sense it. And I don't know, maybe that thread feels like God to me, like that synergy that's like.
So are you like starting with yourself and then expanding bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I try to like picture sitting on the bed, that's sitting on the floor, sitting on the ground, and just kind of keep extrapolating out. Yeah. Till it gets, I'm like a camera, you know, floating above the earth.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like one of my projects is Cardinal Folk, and it's just like a one-man folk band, and it's like pretty happy music. And like, you know, if you look at it at first step, like there's not a lot. Not at first step. If you look at it like at first look or first listen, there's not a lot of depth there. But I try to like, not sneakily, but just like try to bake into that things like that. Like, so I have a song like One Corner at a Time, and it's a 3-verse song. And so the first one starts like, like there's a lot of like, there's a lot of places I want to travel to. Like, I'm chipping away at the world one corner at a time. Then the second verse, your consciousness expands a bit to, there's a lot of people that like I want to know. And friendly faces I want to befriend, and expands a little bit more. And then like, expands to the third verse of like, there's a whole lot going on, and we gotta like, work together to like get, like it can be discouraging doing it by yourself, but if you figure out the whole world is chipping away at itself one corner at a time, that's like awesome. And so it's like it was like an intentional bringing of a spiritual practice of that like prayer, where like you send love to yourself, and then you send love to your loved ones, and you send love to some people you don't like, and then love to your city and like your country and then your world, and then the cosmos, and then the K-cosmos, like I kind of like intentionally like mirrored that song after that practice, and you would never know that, but like I think like energetically like that comes across somehow.
Totally. Yeah. I've only just started getting acquainted with your music, but you got to tell us now about your different personality types, your alter egos that now are going to clash it out. Do you have one in Wander Yonder? Are you more of the nihilist in that one? It's like Cardinal Folk in that band. You're like the real spiritual kind of expanding consciousness. And then the other one, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think it's,
I'm going to wander yonder until I figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah. No, Wander Yonder and Cardinal Folk are just like, I guess, opposite ends of like the one-man band thing. Like Cardinal Folk is doing all the drums and everything with your body parts all at the same time, live, and then Wander Yonder is like using drum machines and synthesizers, but like still doing it by yourself. Sure. And so they're just going to hate each other because that's funny, and they're going to be twin brothers, and they'll just shit on each other from stage and like cover each other's songs and talk about how they do it better, which is funny. Based
on your last show that we went to, are you like second guessing the idea of like booking to both your bands on the same night? Because
I think it would be kind of fun.
2.5 hours was a long time. I don't know if like.
Well, I think I'd rather like, and not rather. It would be really fun to do like 45 minutes.
Bring it up a little bit.
Take a 15-minute break, change outfits,
come back,
and then come back as a different band and do 45 minutes. If I'm doing like a 2-hour set, that would be kind of fun. So I still kind of want to do that, and I think it's interesting too, because like as the one, like Cardinal Folk, playing everything at the same time, like it's a lot on your body to like keep your feet and your arms, right. Like every ligament is going, and then with the
kick drum,
Wander Yonder, it'll be a little bit more of like letting stuff loop and all that, and so like a little bit less physically demanding maybe, but a little bit more mentally demanding of like trying to trigger different samples and loops, and also trying to play like electric guitar and sing and use all the effect pedals and stuff like that. So like I think they'd be like draining in different ways, but it would be kind of fun, I think, still like to double book myself as both of those. Yeah.
And he can teach you how to do it, folks. You were talking about how the excitement of like, if you're a musician and you like I don't know, part of me like gets overwhelmed just even trying to do the whole rub my stomach, pat my head,
Yeah.
And so like trying to watch you like stop to switch to play the kazoo and then come back to then I'm like, man, that's tough work to, and it like you literally are having a small man band, like one man band show happening.
Yeah, it's been fun to learn. I'm not a very musically gifted person. Like I don't think that at all. I'm good at like writing songs and coming up with melodies. So
you're a lyricist.
Yeah, a little bit, I think. I think with the folky stuff, it's a little bit more about like hooks and like stuff that's catchy. And I mean, I guess like catchy kind of runs across all of it. And then like absolute alls, like we call it existential emo folk punk. We've got like one record that's recorded and we're like slowly releasing it. But each song has like a one-word title and then like an author name, like in parentheses, or like a spiritual teacher who's like shaped the ideas behind that one. And so like that's like a little bit more broad, a little bit more like vague. Like you could kind of paint, there's like just it's a little bit more like abstract. Like one song, like the name's Amalgam, and like the lyric is like, an aggregate amalgam, I've been taller than the trees. Like, what does that mean? I don't know, but you get like a sense of it. Like, I mean, I know what it means for me. I'm not going to tell other people. Like,
sure.
But like it paints like a broader picture, and there's like a spiritual kind of thing there. And that one's named Wilbur. So Amalgam, parentheses, Wilbur.
Are you gonna do one day an album that's just Enneagram themed, just like write 9 songs for all the
Someone's
turn
already done that and it's really good, and I don't want to fuck with that. But also,
you could do your own version of it, folk style, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Or just have like a nod to it for one song. I don't know. I just know you're a big Enneagram.
Yeah,
person.
even in like the Absolute All record, like there's one song that is Adderall, and then the parentheses is Stabile, and that's Suzanne Stabile, who's like probably my main Enneagram teacher that I've learned from. And then there's another song that is Fixation, and then in the parentheses Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff is the Russian mystic who introduced the Enneagram. And then I know Richard Rohr also is an Enneagram teacher. I definitely learned some Enneagram stuff from him, but more of I've read more of his other books. But another one, Rohr is the title, and that's a thing. And another title is Wilbur is the author, and Wilbur does a bit with not he doesn't teach the Enneagram, but it's baked into the the integral model. And so anyways, it's kind of it is baked in there for sure.
Yeah, let's go back to integral model, because we brought that up earlier too. What's that? Is that related to the Enneagram, or is that
sure
a separate thing?
Yeah, so I think actually, so you asked a question earlier and I didn't answer it fully, and I think now would be a good time to loop back to it. Your question was, what did you start reading, or what led to some of that faith deconstruction, or how did you get from Young Life Presbyterian to mystical Christianity, the perennial tradition, and spirituality and spiritualism, whatever words you want to use. And that path really started with the Enneagram. So I went to college in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia and just stayed there, which was fun. I loved the Blue Ridge. I love Harrisonburg, where I was living. And one of my friends got married, and their spouse was like, hey, have y'all heard of the Enneagram? And I was with all my best friends from college, because it was a wedding we came back into town for. I mean, I was still in town. They stayed at my house. Mm-hmm. But we all stayed up talking about each other's types and trying to figure it out. And I had already been pretty into the Myers-Briggs system, and into it, not in the sense of I know all 16 types and know the stereotypes, but know all of the cognitive functions and how they interact in their stack of cognitive functions, a deep dive into that. And so I heard about the Enneagram, and it really caught my attention, and I started listening to podcasts. I started reading books. And then as I did that, there would be these guests on other podcasts, and they would have their own podcast, and I'd go listen, and maybe their podcast was a little bit more deconstruction based, or maybe a little bit more spiritual, or started with the Enneagram. I think I probably found Suzanne Stabile next, which then led me to Richard Rohr, which then led me to what's Michael Gunger's thing, the Liturgist.
The Liturgist podcast.
Led me to the Liturgist, which then Richard Rohr led me to Ken Wilber, and then the Liturgist kind of led to Ram Dass, I think. And then I don't know, and then eventually you're getting into
that's
Joseph
the book
Campbell,
I brought for me, right? One of the Ken Wilber books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a brief history of everything.
A brief history of everything.
Yeah, and so the Enneagram was definitely the entryway into that, and so it's really interesting to just think about it from I don't know, a crossover of worlds kind of thing, because George Gurdjieff is the Russian mystic who introduced that symbol to the main world, and he didn't use it in the sense of personality typology, how some of his students had developed it later on in life, but he was very much about spiritual transformation, and very much about this ternary universe where there's these 3 forces, and they interact somehow to create a whole new thing, but it's also, it still has all its separate parts. And it was this very mystical, and it was also very analytical and diagramical and all that. And it's interesting that so many of Gurdjieff followers, Cynthia Bourgeot, who's an Episcopal priest, she's also a follower of Gurdjieff. And so she has an amazing book about the Trinity, and it's from an Episcopal point of view, and a Christian point of view, but also from this Gurdjieffian point of view, and they fit very harmoniously. And it's I don't know, I really enjoy that, and it's interesting just to kind of see how that Enneagram world or language or energy kind of got in there and then started to unravel everything, but then also put it back together later. So yeah.
What is Gurdjieff?
Gurdjieff, yeah.
Hey, don't act so smarter than me. All your fancy words are just throwing at me.
No, I mean, it's just you would.
What do you think you're better than me?
People just know words from the books they read, and
No,
everyone reads different books.
I love that. No,
but
I like that you let me borrow that book, and it's already just fascinating. The 2 pages I've read of the intro.
Yeah, no, it's so good. Ken Wilber books are thick. He's so analytical, and like, his model is integral theory, and like it's kind of his whole thing was like, how do we reconcile all these things that are different, and like how do we figure out a map of the maps, like a map of them all, the models, and like that was kind of his big initial life's work, and it kind of developed into all these other things, and
all in the realm of psychology. It's kind of
I mean, he would not consider himself a psychology, but more of like a philosopher, but really like more of like a map maker. And so there's also like there's a ton of psychology, there's a ton of spirituality, there's a ton of philosophy. So it's kind of like, a big mixture of all those things. There's also like a lot of like sociology, a lot of like personal development stuff, because, it's kind of based on some of these, scaled or, levels of consciousness, etc., or just levels of development, which is like, based on like the Claire Graves model, which like I also like, spiral dynamics, like Claire Graves. I think that was something that I also found after like finding Richard Rohr, because he also like talks about that a bit, and that's like a lens to see the world. And anyway, all that to say, I love conceptual models, and they kind of like flow into each other, and they all offer like a little bit different way to see. And it's like, the map is never the territory. Like you can never draw a map that accurately represents everything that you see, but each little map shows you a little different snippet of it.
Yeah, we talk about, and like I said, I feel like I need to revisit. Like I listened to the episode of them that are just about spiral dynamics. That was like the first time I ever even heard of that kind of framework presented. But it sounds like something that's kind of been impactful for you, of understanding and like existing with people, and like, like you said, you never try to take the things like the Enneagram or any of these things to be like typecasting, or like you said, to be like, I can tell you're operating in your orange, your 9-ness, but it does help you like understand, like kind of create more empathy, or just like understanding of like, oh, okay, yeah, like this spiral dynamics, whatever that color is, basically the feudal, it was very protective for our tribe and our people to develop the idea of a god to war over blue. And kill each other. Yeah, blue. Yeah,
traditionalism, the rational mind.
Right.
Not rational mind.
Irrational. I don't know.
It's escaping me, but yeah.
We don't have to go into it. This is not
the righteous mind.
This won't be the spiral dynamics breakdown podcast episode, but I don't know, just like the ensemble of all these things and how they've shaped your journey. Like, how do you feel like that has tied? I mean, you've kind of shared a little bit how it has tied into your music. But also you're a woodworker, and you have all these actual like hands-on skills that you built your own tiny house. Everybody go check out Slacker Scott.
Scott 27 Special.
27 Special. He's out here building tiny homes and kind of low-key blowing up on YouTube. But like, I don't know, where do you see like some of the tactile hands-on? Because like the lyrics and stuff, and the stuff in your music, yeah, that's hands-on, and you're kind of, but you're more or less still, you're writing lyrics, and it's still kind of a
it's not like on the gross plane of like actual like tangible things.
And so I don't know, I'm just curious if there's any little lessons you've learned about yourself in woodworking that just feels like, I feel very transcendent in these moments when you were building a trench or digging a trench last night. Were you feeling very
probably not super transcendent then, but it was really fun. It's just like I'm learning a new thing. Like I've never trenched something. I've never I've never used a trencher, and I got to use a trencher, and like how fun was that? And someone paid me to kind of help do that and rented the trencher, and so like now I know how to trench stuff, and like I would love to lay some pipe underground below the frost line another time. That sounds great. Like I'll probably do that on a property I own one day or something. Like it's awesome. I don't know. I think the it's interesting, like looking at the world through typology, and like it's interesting when you get into the Enneagram, because then you start to see your shadow side, but then you also see like your strengths, And I think what it kind of teaches you about both of them is that you can't really take credit for either. And so if you can't take credit for your shadow side, like you're kind of left with like not beating yourself up. And if you can't take credit for your strengths, you're left with like not being so egoic and proud. And then you just are, and everything just is. The great absolute all of everything just exists. And, you know,
band name plug there, by the way.
Like,
see, you all see the layers this guy does. He just like he weaves in even in his dialogue. He's like, oh, but then when we're out here slacking on the Lord. No, I'm just kidding.
No, yeah, and no, it's like it is interesting. Like my approach towards like I'm an Enneagram 7. My dad's Enneagram 5, so both head types, but he is like focuses a lot more on the planning stage, and then I'm much more like fast moving, go get 'em, like less thinking about the consequences. And it's like when we build something, it's very different. Like I'll build a porch and like throw it together and like figure it out on the fly, or like, you know, whatever, like a project. And then for him, it's like a lot of planning and like a lot of watching YouTube videos. It's just very different. And so like, even like in my woodworking stuff, they're 100% of like are like parallels to that. It's like Slacker Scott is like, what is the cheapest and quickest way I can get to this, but also introduce like the most creativity to it. And like that's incredibly like a 7 thing and incredibly like an ENFP thing. And I don't know, like I was talking about like star charts last night, and like probably a pretty Aries sun thing. And
oh, you Aries sun, you with your
I know the fire signs,
with your whatever moon rising.
Yeah, I got a Cancer moon, so water moon, and then my rising is air, which is also very 7-y and very ENFP, and it's interesting. Also, like very.
See, I don't know if anyone's ever done my true star chart, so I don't know. I just know I'm a Cancer. I don't know what my risings are.
Cancer, cool. But no, I think I'm not exactly sure the question, but.
Yeah, it kind of got away from me there. I guess I just want to know, like, how do you also incorporate just, or I don't know, like you said, when we are just existing and when you're reading and you get in these heady spaces, these heady circles, and you read books and you're like, I just need to go build a house now. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, like I do a lot of the listening while I'm building the house or driving to and from work and stuff. But it's actually funny, like, when I learned about the Enneagram, I knew that like the growth path for 7 was towards 5, and I was like, let me add like a 5. 5s are slower pace. Like I forced myself to take the long way to work for 3 years, so I added 25 minutes onto my commute every day, like round trip, and like it's just so interesting to think about like what I learned, not having to think about getting on the highway and just listening to podcasts, and I don't know, it's just all the spiritual development has been really interesting. And I think it kind of gets back to that, like what is just is. And there's like a certain bit of like what Scots are Scotting, you know, like I'm a Scot and I'm Scotting, like, and what do Scots do when they're Scotting? Like they build stuff sometimes, and they, you know, tackle projects, and they start too many projects and don't finish them, and then they get some spiritual practice in their life, and then they get better about finishing projects, you know, like what does a Micah-ing look like? And it's like one of those impossible questions, and it's like one of those like riddles that like is so frustrating to hear spiritual people talk about, because you're like, what the fuck are you actually saying? Yeah. And it's so frustrating, but then like it's interesting like to revisit spiritual works that you're a fan of time and time after your life, and you feel like you understand more and more of it. And I think part of the building and part of, you know, like creating these videos and like working with my hands, it's just like Scots be Scottin', you know, and like that
Scott be
feels true to like what I want to do and like who I am. And like I probably shouldn't have started playing music. Like there wasn't a great, like there's still not a great voice attached, and like the music
stop
is
that. Everybody go listen to his music. He sounds great.
And like, you know, I'm like, it really isn't like a humble brag. Like you can go listen to like the stuff I put out when I first started, and it's like there was a lot of confidence there that like wasn't followed up by like the actual skill. But like I don't know, it's kind of beautiful, and like I do like, you know, there is like a tie into everything. Like,
sure.
The thing I like to work with the most in woodworking is like reclaimed wood. So like I started working with pallet wood when I was in college. So it's actually been like 10 years of working with pallet wood. And first of all, it was free. And so like, you know, I'm into inexpensive things, and like kind of grew up like my family sacrificed money so we could be present together. Like my mom like was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad stopped his job to be a contractor and like make less money, But we did that and like, got presence with each other and like relationship. And so like I had that modeled my whole life. And in some ways it plays out in poor kid syndrome that I've gotten over pretty good. It just dropped $170 at the record store.
Holy shit.
I
You tried to invite me to come with him after this. I'm like, no, Scott, I know where this goes.
I know. I shouldn't have gone. I wanted like one Mandolin Orange record or one Milk Carton Kids record. I left with 2 Mandolin Orange records, a Milk Carton Kid records, a Sigur Rós record, a Kanye West record, and the Avett Brothers and Manchester Orchestra. And they were like, hey, you qualify for a free merch item, which is really funny. But
you now have joined our hot list.
Yeah.
You're going to be the one. Hey, have you seen that this has come out? Sir.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you're the one who gave me my first record player and initiated me into this world. I'm like, well, thank you.
All your money on
thank
records.
you for giving me this great burden now. Thank you for giving me a hobby that now is going to be need its own line item in my budget.
And isn't that spiritual awakening too? Like,
yeah.
Fuck. Like, it's such a burden. Like ignorance is bliss is like true sometimes. And like, I feel very fortunate, like that the box I grew up in was pretty positive, and like it contained me. Like, I like Richard Rohrlich's, it's like you can't grow up if you don't have any walls to like push against. You can't grow up, and like a container is helpful. And like the first half of life is building your container, and the second half of life is leaving it. And I did this really interesting like deconstruction while still being in it at the same time. And like I never really had this time of like, everything's terrible, I hate the world, like it just kind of, like God doesn't exist, it's the worst. And like it transitioned like pretty seamlessly, and I don't know, I'm really thankful for that. But but getting back to the woodworking thing, like I started working with pallet wood, and pallet woods are the worst type of wood to work with. Like they're on pallets because they suck, because people don't want to use them for anything else. Like we'll use them for shipping pallets, they'll get beat up, drug across the world. They'd be ugly as fuck, all splintered, like terrible. No one should work with them. You can't make them square, etc. And that's like my favorite thing to work with. And of course, it's occurred to me over the years, like, Scott, you have poor self-image. You have thought that you were the beat up pallet wood, and like, in working with that wood to make it beautiful, to make it something that people see and are really proud of and really like drawn to, and it's exciting. Like, you have to put a lot of work and effort and love into it, but like it can be made beautiful, and like nothing is, nothing is ever quite lost. And yeah, I don't know. It's like interesting. You see those parallels kind of all over.
That's what I appreciate about you. And that's how I knew when I first met you. I was like, oh, me and this guy are going to be pals. Cause just both on the spiritual dimensional, like aspects, shared language that we have around things. I was like, I told you I'd do this podcast, and I also play guitar, kind of just jam at home stuff. Not like you. I'm not going to play in shows, but I just appreciate. We were both like, oh, we both are like we've kind of started this whole like, relatively ish once a week. We kind of get together, you, me, and your wife, and we kind of like have like a creative night where like maybe we're doing video editing, maybe we're working on websites, maybe I'm doing some writing. Austin's been writing her book, and it's just like. Like there's cool creative energy that comes from those kind of shared relationships. And then, but I like that, you're saying like, you'll just like, hey, I might not fucking know how I'm going to do this, but I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to shoot, I'm just going to shoot for it. And
Austin likes to say I have the how hard could it be gene. And I also have the look at me gene.
And your dad's like, no, we must watch many more YouTube videos.
It is, it is harder to do projects with him. I have to be more patient. But I also really enjoy it and love it. Yeah.
Well, tell us, Scott, what are some of the projects you're working on currently? What do you have coming up this year? I know you got some shows you've got booked.
Yeah, playing shows, like trying to work on booking. I think booking itself has been hard because there's a lot of like reaching out to people and then potentially being rejected, and also having to negotiate money and like what you're worth. And like those are all things that I have enjoyed not having around, like rejection and asking for like what I should be worth. Yeah, that's terrible. I hate it. But I'm working on it, and like that's like a growth path in and of itself to like tackle a thing that I am not comfortable with. So I'm working on that. I am about to start a another tiny house build, and the whole idea was to build a tiny house as tiny as it could be. I got a lot of comments and a lot of love for my 27-foot long tiny house that I live in, and a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, 27 grand for that? Like, that is amazing. That's so cheap. And then other people are like, that's pretty expensive. I could never save up for that. And so I was like, let me see like what the smallest tiny house I could build would be that also like that's also livable. Like, one of the things about my house is that it's very livable. Like, the design and floor plan is great. And that's like been the most comments and like love has been given towards that. And so like I wanted to see how I could incorporate that into another like tiny house. And so I'm working on doing that and trying to build it as cheap as possible. And I'm also like trying to like kind of get on like the person's level who would be doing this. And so like I've been like selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace, and I've been working odd jobs to like save the money to do this and like buy all the things for it, just because, you know, like that's the kind of energy of someone who, you know, might be staying in one of these, and I kind of wanted to like lean into that while I'm building it.
Yeah.
And so that's another big project I'm about to work on, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, I don't know. Life is full of projects, and yeah, I don't know. I'm very happy to be alive and working on stuff and having friends, and like, you know, working on relationships is a whole thing too. And
Yeah.
I just am getting released from physical therapy to play volleyball again, and so I'm excited. Like, I have to relearn that in a lot of ways. I can't like play as aggressive because I have a giant ACL, PCL, MCL injury, and I don't know.
All the L's.
Yeah,
all
all
the
of
things.
the ligaments.
Man. Hey, well, congrats, dude. I know it's been a big, just like life, like adjustment, but so cool to see you. Like I said, I didn't see you in the throes of like the shitty part of it all. I've seen you just more of the I gotta go leave work, go to the physical therapy, but it's like it's a big loss to then. It sounds like you bounced back actually really well for not having surgery and everything. That's a big deal.
It's making me cocky, like with my body. Like, I'm like, I didn't even need surgery. Like, I tore 5 ligaments in my knee, 2 of them completely, and I don't need surgery. My body's doing great. I'm running, playing tennis, volleyball, like whatever.
Yeah.
But I need to not be too cocky, but also like proud of this structure frame that I exist in.
Hell yeah, man. Proud of your journey, dude. Better for knowing you. And yeah, thanks for just sharing a little bit of yourself and what you're about with the world. And I say the world with, you know, mom and dad, people on the show here.
Yeah.
You know, my humble but great little followers. Would you mind going to throw out where you live on the interwebs, the links and
oh sure, yeah.
Handles?
YouTube is Slacker Scott. That's also my Instagram. And then music is Cardinal Folk, Absolute All, Wander Yonder, and to be fair, if you're Absolute All is like a rebrand name of North Star Railcar, which was like the original band. Like, we formed like originally as a trio, and it was going to be more like Arcade Fire meets Avett Brothers, and then the one dude in the trio left, and it was just me and my bandmate Christian, and like we're fairly emo kids, and we're like, let's make this loud and big. Like, originally we were only giving Christian 2 drums. Like, you get a snare, a kick, and a cymbal. Like, that's all you get. And then now it's like, how many drums do you want, Christian? You can have all of them. And we've got like double kick pedals and stuff. And so like, anyway, all that to say, like, we spent a while being North Star Railcar and like writing songs, and there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube there, which is like fun. Like, I'm glad and proud we made it. But when like we like recorded our record and like, you know, invested a bunch of our own money into it, because that's like music, you know, like you pay thousands of dollars for instruments and for recording, and then you don't make it back, but it's beautiful because that's like, you know, that's how Christian's Christian and Scott's Scott, you know?
Yeah.
But all that to say, like, we were trying to figure out like a better band name to like kind of like encompass that, because North Star Railcar is like sounds a little folky, a little rootsy, and Absolute All is a lot more like existential and big and emo and spiritual, and kind of like gets like across that point of like the what is and the mystery of that, but also like everyone kind of being included thing, which is like also like a theme that kind of runs through, like, you know, Cardinal Folk also, like, it's a shout out to my home state, Virginia, the state bird is cardinal, and then the folk music, like roots music I play, but also like a shout out to you, everyone, because cardinal means of the utmost importance, and folk is people, and like, you know, that's like the vibe there. And so like it's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of like have that thing running through, like just the eternal optimist. And
I was gonna say, when I picture Scottying, I just picture treating everything and everyone in life as of the utmost importance.
Yeah, I definitely try. And at the same time, like there's limitations to the world, and so there's people I love more than other people, and there's things I love more than other things, and I have to pick and choose, and that's heartbreaking and is beautiful and what makes life awesome. And one of the things I'm excited about is that we get to be friends, and that you're one of my top people, and I get to spend a lot of time hanging out with you, and it's gorgeous. And you are a gorgeous human with like a really kind spirit and like a bolsterous energy. Yeah.
I'm just over here getting all red and gushy over it.
Oh, you live red and gushy.
I basically. I was gonna say, when you said when
gushy.
Micah's miking, it's actually just everything you just said: red, gushy, boisterous, and then just whatever you call it, truth bombing or whatever, or overindulge or overshare bombing, self-disclosure. I don't know why I can't ever get that right. I'm like, what do you call that?
One time, Austin and I made wine. Like it was like one of our date nights, and we each like made like our own blend of like fruit juices, and mine was self-disclosure bomb red. And if I ever like actually make some good wine, like that's what I'll name it.
That's what my friends. Yeah, that basically. When you catch me on my first dates out here on these Hinge apps, I'm just like self-disclosure bombing, like, let me just tell you about how my shit looked this morning and I'm just kidding. It's just like,
yeah.
Wait, why didn't they call me
back?
But
that's like a beautiful thing. I don't know. I love that. Like, I love it when people share like very upfront and like get into the heart of things. And I also think that's like a personality thing in a lot of ways. And I don't know.
Well, thanks for self-disclosing with us. And, yeah, excited to have you on the show and just have you back again. And we'll have to play some music. And I want to get my first guitar and some stuff.
First electric guitar?
I want to get my first electric guitar. It won't be the first one I've ever had in my entire life, but it'll be the first one I'll have had as an adult. So thanks for being here, dude. Y'all go check out Cardinal Folk, Absolute All. And, just check out Scott's stuff, Slacker Scott on YouTube. And as always, follow, smash that subscribe button. Follow Pray for Micah. Send me some prayers.
Pray for Micah.
Yeah. Send me some prayers. Send me some Venmos.
Pray for Chrissy.
Pray for Chrissy, our Lord and Savior, Chrissy Christ.
Chrissy Christ.
Dead Asbell though. Thanks for joining me for the Pray for Micah podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and leave a review, and check out my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. Pray for Micah Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.
You are now re-entering the normal world.